Welcome to the review of The Last of Us Left Behind. If you're looking for the written version of this review, you can find a link to my website in the video description. The original game was released in 2014 as downloadable content for The Last of Us. In the same year, it was included in The Last of Us Remastered with improved graphics at 1080p instead of 720p and a higher frame rate of 60 frames per second. Before continuing any further, keep in mind that this contains spoilers for The Last of Us, the original main game. There are two places the game takes place in, both in the past after completing The Last of Us. One part of the game takes place after Joel suffers his deadly injury and Ellie is forced to protect him and find medical supplies in a mall. The other part takes place before Joel and Ellie meet. This part of the past focuses on Ellie while she's still in her military school, and her friend Riley meets her after a long absence. Riley was briefly mentioned in The Last of Us as the last friend Ellie spent time with before getting bit and meeting Joel. The mall part focuses on independent gameplay and fighting enemies. The other part of the game, further in the past, with Riley, focuses more on the gamer getting a better understanding of Ellie's character. The combat parts in the mall were great, and it still includes letters you can find from non-existent characters, just like in the original Last of Us game. These letters give us a better insight into people's struggle dealing with the chaotic world. The parts in the past with Riley are slower paced, but I found them more interesting. That's because this part of the game focuses on greater character understanding of Ellie and how she interacted with a friend. She's a young teenager growing in a post-apocalyptic world, so seeing her fascinated with mall lights, arcade games, costumes, and more, it makes the gamer sympathetic to her and shows us how many of us take the simplest things for granted. Left Behind focuses on two characters, Ellie and Riley. Left Behind shows two contrasts to Ellie's character. The part in the mall is what we're familiar with. She's a tough, strong female lead with a tough determination to save Joel, fight enemies independently, and still remain calm despite all her obstacles. Ellie, further in the past with Riley, hasn't seen real combat. In fact, she's rather reluctant to be too rebellious to her school's rules. It's fascinating to see Ellie with Riley, and how she's still rather innocent and behaves well, like how a kid should. Seeing how much Ellie has grown after meeting Joel is one of the most fascinating parts of the game. Riley is a great character. She's more adventurous than Ellie in the past. She isn't shy to enjoy life and break the rules. She knows there's more to life than just being locked up in a military school and following the rules. She's also a kid and just wants to have fun. This is understandable, as coming by simple items like watching a movie in this world is even tough. One of the best parts of Riley is how much of a friend she is to Ellie. It helps to show a softer side of Ellie, since in The Last of Us, she's unfortunately forced into many combat situations. The combat system is pretty much the same as The Last of Us. Ellie isn't as tough as Joel, so you have to be rather clever when fighting enemies. Of course, you can go straight into fighting enemies, but it'll make things incredibly difficult and sometimes impossible. Your best bet is to do things subtly. One of the main changes is that you can have enemies fight one another. Giving any more details about that might slightly spoil things, so I'll leave it at that. I'll just say that this is a very welcome addition to combat and something that happens more frequently in The Last of Us Part 2. Unlike The Last of Us, this game doesn't have a skill tree for you to upgrade. What you get in your surroundings and from fallen enemies is all you have to use. Because Ellie's limited with the amount of skills and weapons that she can use, combat is tough. You'll need to plan how to fight enemies, and it's very likely she'll get killed and you'll have to restart from a checkpoint. Of course, you can play on an easier difficulty. In sequences with Riley, gameplay breaks regular combat mechanics and introduces more light-hearted items in gameplay. I won't go into further detail as it could contain some spoilers. As mentioned earlier, this game was released as a downloadable content for the original The Last of Us, and was later bundled with the remastered version. So not surprisingly, this is a short game. It took me about 2 hours to complete. Whether the game takes place when Ellie finds supplies to help Joel or further in the past with Riley, both settings take place in a mall. Just like the original Last of Us, the environment is a bit linear, so you'll follow a predefined path. When fighting enemies, some areas are compact, so you're forced into direct combat. Other areas allow you to maneuver around areas and take enemies out quietly. Just like The Last of Us Remastered, it's hard to believe this game was released in 2014. Even by today's standards, the graphics and animation are incredible. Details to the environment and characters are spectacular. Just like I mentioned in my review of The Last of Us Remastered, one of the most important things is facial animations, and Left Behind keeps that same great standard. Left Behind retains the same strong soundtrack from The Last of Us. Just like the original game, the soundtrack stops at just the right times and helps set an unsettling tone. Aside from the soundtrack, one of the most important things about the game is voice acting. Just like The Last of Us, Left Behind knows that voice acting is pivotal to making the characters seem more realistic. Ashley Johnson returns to voice Ellie and does a superb job once again. While side characters are pretty scarce, Yanni Kang does excellent work to voice Riley.
All this time, I thought you were dead. Yeah. Here. Look.
Riley's performance is so well done along with the superb script that within this short game, you feel the deep bond between Ellie and Riley's strong friendship. Infected enemies once again sound great and are fantastic at creating an ominous environment for the gamer. Human enemies don't have many lines, but there are enough of them so at least each one of their voices sound unique and the same voices aren't being reused. The original price of $15 when it first released was a bit expensive for such a short game. But now that it's included in The Last of Us Remastered, there's just about nothing to complain about. There's a great balance between a calmer setting with Ellie and Riley, and then a more combat-based setting with Ellie trying to help Joel. It doesn't feel rushed, but surprisingly natural transition between the two settings. In this very short game, the most standout item is a relationship between Ellie and Riley. It's amazing how the developers, creative team, and actors help show the strong bond between the two characters in such a short amount of time. This is a must-play content if you completed The Last of Us. And that's a wrap for me. So if you found this video useful, be sure to check out my social links in the video description, hit the like button, it does help, subscribe, and thanks for watching.